Hello there, and welcome to our podcast, Africa to the World, where we tell African stories to transform lives and bring us together in the spirit of Ubuntu. So, my name is Yvonne,
And I'm Shami.
and we are your hosts. So, today's episode, we are continuing on our story and our journey about the issue of Hunhu and Christianity based on the issue of teenage pregnancy. So today's topic, we're mainly going to be focusing on the political and the cultural aspects of teenage pregnancy. And we are so happy today to have with us two wonderful women who are going to be joining us on this conversation.
In today's episode, we have got Anna from Uganda and Victorine from Cameroon. So I'm just going to ask them, ladies, if we can start with Anna, just introduce yourself briefly, tell us who you are, what you do, and what got you interested in jumping onto this podcast and joining the conversation.
All right. Good morning. My name is Annah Kamusiime. I am joining in from Uganda, from the capital city of Kampala. I am a PhD researcher at the International Institute of Social Studies of Erasmus University Rotterdam. As a researcher and a student also, my research interest is on young motherhood, how young motherhood is framed by policies, by interventions, and by discourse, and how that framing then shapes how young mothers are able to access sexual and reproductive health and services. But also, I am currently doing my internship with UNFPA Uganda, and I am specifically tagged to the national campaign against teenage pregnancy, child marriage, and positive parenting in Uganda. But also, I am a programs director with an organization called Nascent Research and Development Organization. My interest in joining in this discussion is because of my long relationship, having worked with young people, especially young mothers in Uganda. And so I hope that I am able to share part of the stories I have accumulated for a period of time, having interacted with young people in Uganda. I'm so delighted to be a part of this podcast. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anna. Your profile is so exciting, and I'm sure we're going to learn so much from you today. Victorine,
Thank you so much for having me on this program. I am honored and privileged. I am called Victorine Ghislaine Nzino Munongo. I am a social scientist from Cameroon, in the capital city, which is Yaoundé, and I function in my daily activity at the Ministry of Scientific Research and Innovation as a researcher. And my interest in taking part into this program is based on my study interest, my research interest, which is on gender issues, and sustainable development. Well, it has been recorded that half of the population in Cameroon is made up of women, and majority of the population is made up of youth, talking about teenagers, and the issues of sexual reproduction and health is a major issue which is considered by public policies. So, talking about it today is an honor for me and a privilege to add in of some of the research results found. Thank you.
we're so happy to have you here, and I'm so happy that the house is full of researchers today. So, we're going to have a very, very interesting discussion. So, just to kick us off, Yvonne and I, for the past few weeks, have been talking about teen pregnancy. And we've been looking at this from a Christian perspective and from an African perspective. So, when I say African perspective, we're speaking mostly of the concept of Hunu or Ubuntu. So, our discussions have been weaving that into the story of how teenage pregnancy plays out within Zimbabwe. So we thought, as a great way to end the series that we've been doing, we're going to bring in perspectives from different African countries so we can see if there are any overlaps or if there are different ways that different countries have been dealing with this, and we can hopefully learn from each other or just share with the world, share with the people within our countries better ways in which to start dealing with the issue of teenage pregnancy. So, the concept of Hunhu or Ubuntu basically speaks about accepting people around you. It speaks of love. It speaks of harmony. It speaks of just seeing the person next to you as a brother or as a sister and treating them as such. But at the same time, the concept has a moral side to it, right? Where there are certain boundaries that have been put in place, where we say for a person to have hunu, there's someone who is, in the context of sex in particular, there's someone who is not supposed to engage in premarital sex. And obviously, when it now becomes evident that you've been doing that for a woman because you've fallen pregnant, it comes with all these different labels that are attached onto you. So now the community sees you as someone who does not have hunu. And it doesn't only reflect on you as the individual or as the child, but it also reflects on your family. So the family tends to respond in a very negative way. They tend to distance themselves because now you've received this label as someone who hasn't been raised right. Maybe the community is saying your parents failed you, you're disrespectful, you have no morals. And so the family tends to want to distance itself from that entire situation. Girls, to remedy the situation, find themselves either getting married. So I found out that I'm pregnant. What's the best thing I can do? Let me get married before it becomes evident to the rest of the world that I've fallen pregnant outside of wedlock. Or in some cases, the family then throws the girl out of the house. So you've brought shame on the family. We don't want anything to do with you. Make a plan. We don't want you as a part of this family. And in some cases, girls, to avoid this, instead of choosing the marriage route, end up trying to find ways to abort their child so that, again, they hide evidence of their moral failing, in quotes. So, as we start the conversation, it would be really great to hear from Anna and Victorine if this concept of Uhunu or Ubuntu in one way or another exists in their different countries. And if so, how does it impact the way that teen pregnancy is looked at within the country? So we can start with Victorine and then we'll go to Anna.
Thank you very much, Shamifo. I would like to say that the Ubuntu concept is very common and rampant in the African culture. It is something that most of the... Can you hear?
Oh, and she's gone offline. Okay, so we can go to Anna. Anna, you can kick us off.
Thank you so much, Shamizo. And you have explained very well the concept of Ubuntu and how, of course, the ideal is that we are human beings and we should be treated as so and we should be accepted as so. But in the context of discussing sexual and reproductive health and rights, and especially for young people, the concept of Ubuntu then goes with some conditions. Like you can only be a human being, you can only be accepted if you meet the following conditions. So, for instance, in Uganda, a young person is supposed to be asexual, as you have talked about, provided they are not yet married. Society really has written a script, a social script, which the young people and the old alike have got to follow. You are a young girl, you are supposed to be virgin, then you are supposed to marry, and then you are supposed to bear children. But if you diverge from this particular script, you are a young person who is not married, you become pregnant and you bear a child, then that is problematic. That is non-normative because that is unexpected of you. And like you have ably said, then even the context of Uganda, you are called several names. They are called a waste, you are a bad omen, you are a curse, you are a poor example to the others. You tarnish the name of the family, of the community. You have come into like the opportunities of the other girls in your family. When I was growing up, we still have a saying up to now. In my village, we have a saying that when one girl on a hill gets spoiled, in this case, you get pregnant, then you compromise the opportunities of all the girls on this particular hill to get married. So it is that problematic that when one girl in this community becomes pregnant out of a union, then she tarnishes the name of all the girls in this given community who are all going to be questioned. They are all going to be called all sorts of names, and many people are going to fear marrying her. So, and not only marrying her, but marrying every other girl in this community. And that is why teenage pregnancy becomes highly problematic and is viewed as highly problematic in not only in a family but also in the community as well. Shamizu, if you can let me, I just wanted to first say that to give a context of Uganda, currently in Uganda, 1 in every 4 teenagers below 19 years have given birth. So the number in Uganda is high, and that is about 25% of all teenagers who have become mothers. And because of COVID, it even became much higher because we saw about 1,500 plus teenagers getting pregnant on a daily basis. And also, this even includes about 250 children who are below the age of 15 years who were getting pregnant every month. So whereas, of course, it is teenage pregnancy is seen as highly problematic, in Uganda, the prevalence is also very high and was also complicated by COVID when it set in.
Wow, that is a lot to digest, Anna. You've said so much, and we're definitely going to start unpacking that. But before we get to it, Victorine is back on the line, so I'm just going to ask her to also give us an idea of how teenage pregnancy plays out in the Cameroonian context.
Now, talking about teen pregnancies, um, is a major concern. It remains a major concern. Why? Because in 2022, the statistics show that out of 4 teenagers, 1 teenager is found pregnant or has already given birth. So the major concern here is to find out what are the factors that maintain these statistics and how to work on preventing these kinds of situation. And according to statistics, 12% of teenagers below 15 years old are already introduced to sex practices. And also, teenagers below 18 years old are rated at 56%. These are alarming numbers. Why? Because when these teenagers are introduced to these sexual practices, they don't have the full picture of what they are getting into. They don't have the full knowledge about contraceptive methods to prevent them from getting pregnant. They don't have the full information on the health, on sexual health, in order for them to be protected. This lack of information is due to lack of parental guidance. Parents are so much busy, and sometimes parents are also too ashamed to talk about these topics with their children, and the youth, the teenagers, are left to themselves. They are left to social media influence. They are left to peer pressure, and sometimes, in some cases, they are exposed to sexual abuse. So it is really a call for concern that parental guidance, role models, tutors look into communicating sexual values to their teenagers. What is peculiar in the Cameroonian context is that the lack of information is not about the existence of contraceptive methods, but rather on how they are used and where to get them. And these women are not encouraged to overcome this obstacle because of a poor perception of contraceptive methods. That is, the low rate of women who engage in using a contraceptive method come up with bad testimonies or poor experiences that is not encouraging the others to get into it. As a matter of fact, statistics have shown that 97% of women in the age range of 15 to 49 know about contraceptive method, but most of them don't go into it. Talking about consequences, teenagers that engage in sex practices are highly exposed to health challenge. And these challenges are observed physically, mentally, emotionally, and even socially. And these factors are all interrelated. Why? Because a teenager that finds herself pregnant is exposed to social shaming. And because of that, she keeps herself from adequate medical assistance, which leads to putting her life in danger and that of the child she is carrying. Sometimes this social shaming can lead to an attempt of abortion. And it should be noted that in Cameroon, abortion is a crime that is punished by the law. So that put into consideration when a teenager gets in the way of abortion, she goes through illegal methods, that is informal methods, which can lead to more complication, which can lead to psychological trauma, which is another issue to handle.
Victorine, are you there? Okay, so unfortunately, we've lost Victorine due to technical difficulties, but we still have Anna on the line, and so we're going to continue this conversation with her, and hopefully, we can get Victorine joining us in another segment. So, Anna, you spoke so much around how teenage pregnancy and teenage motherhood is dealt with in Uganda. And so when I met Anna, I met her at a conference where she was presenting a paper on the same subject. And there was a lot of information that you shared that was so interesting around how teenage pregnancy used to be dealt with in pre colonial times and how that has changed. So you've already given us this idea of humanness and how it's looked at in Uganda to say, for you to be human, especially as a young person, it comes with certain conditions. You cannot step outside the line of the boundaries that have been set. So, Anna, can you just tell us how did this affect how people have dealt with teen pregnancy from pre colonial times to where we are today? What has been happening?
In the pre-colonial era in Uganda, I'm going to give an example of the Western Uganda where I come from. In the Western Uganda, premarital pregnancy was highly unacceptable, actually completely unacceptable, and it carried a death penalty. In one of the areas There's a lake called Lake Bunyonyi, which is also in Western Uganda. There is an island which is called Company Island, and this is where they would dump girls who would get pregnant out of a marriage. There's actually one lady who still lives. She's called Mauda. She still lives, and she's the one who she has shared her story really quite a lot and how she went through this. Also, in Chisizi Hospital is now a hospital, but previously there was no hospital. There were just Chisizi Falls, and they would also dump their girls who became pregnant out of a wedlock. And in all these cases, whether in Chisizi or in Lake Bunyonyi, a company island, these girls were taken by the men, and they were taken by men from within their own households. So your brothers, your uncles, your fathers were the ones who would take these girls to be punished. But the most important thing which I want to also share is that this kind of punishment was influenced by the fact that for a girl who got pregnant out of wedlock, it had financial implications for the household. It means that when she got pregnant out of marriage, then no other man was going to marry her, and that means that the household would lose the cows, would lose the goats, which they would have otherwise got had this girl remained asexual. And also the reason why men were so much the ones responsible for doing this punishment is because if this girl got married and their family got cows, then these cows would be used by the brother to then also be able to marry. So, for a girl who became pregnant out of wedlock, it means that she had lost her worth. The worth of a woman, of a girl, was to enable the household to be able to get cows. So that is why this was such a severe punishment, really, at that time. So the whole thing of sexuality was highly guarded because it had a lot to do with how this particular family was going to be treated. Eventually, this practice changed. In the colonial period, it changed. When colonialists came, then they introduced religion. So the practice of throwing off the girls at Chisizi stopped. Even that one of throwing them, dumping them at the island, it also stopped. However, it is not enough to say that when the pre-colonial punishment for adolescent mothers stopped, it is not enough to say that then it meant that girls could become pregnant and they were not punished. No, they were still punished even in the colonial period. Because earlier, Shamizo, you talked about discussing teenage pregnancy also in the context of Christianity and spirituality. When colonial regime also set in, then they introduced new notions. For instance, the issue of now sin came into the picture, sinning before God, being pure. Also, those concepts which were not earlier there, they came in. So it still meant that when a girl became pregnant, then they had committed a sin in the eyes of God. They were impure and they needed to seek for forgiveness. They needed to repent. So it still continued, really. It changed in a way that they were not killed anymore, but they were still under the bigger eye still of the religiosity, which also had to control their sexuality in that particular way. And of course, as we have gone along, many changes have taken place even today. But what I can say throughout all these changes that have happened, even today, I see fluidity between the past and the present because sexuality for young people in Uganda is still highly patrolled. It is really highly surveilled. I mean, even girls today who become pregnant today in the 21st century, they still experience punishment in different ways. Not killed, but they still experience punishment. For example, many homes, they would chase these girls away from their homes. They are sent to other relatives. There are many girls who become homeless and they have to go and look for survival from somewhere else. When they are in school, most of them lose the opportunity to continue schooling. In Uganda, it is just in 2020 when COVID set in that the government finally passed a law which allows student mothers to go back to school. But before then, the punishment basically, which was not by law, but which was implied by the silence, was that if a girl became pregnant, then they were chased away from school. But at least in 2020, we now have the national guidelines, which allows them to return to school after a period of time. But the girls have to leave school when the pregnancy is 3 months, and they can only return back to school when the baby is about 6 months, and they are advised to change the school. But even when we have these guidelines, we have seen this year that many girls who became mothers have still not been able to return to school because the shame remains, really, even when there is law, the shame remains. Even among teachers, they still speak ill about them. Then, of course, they have all these hardships of childcare. Where do you leave a baby? Then their families are not willing to really be very supportive because of the extra burden. They have to pay fees for their daughter, then they have to manage their baby, then the expenses increase. So, in a way, then most of the girls, the punishment they get is that you wanted to be a mother, so be a mother, then stay home and be a mother. So the way it has been handled has changed over time, but the changes, even with the changes, the adolescent mothers still experience hardships in a way. I have met some girls who have told me that because of this particular pregnancy, I am as good as dead. And that is why I normally relate the current today with the past, because in the past, in the pre-colonial era, these girls faced a death penalty in the western part of Uganda. Today, they do not face a death penalty, but in a way, they face like social death. Their lives, they are not able to do, they are not able to exercise particular rights, they are not able to achieve really their dream as they would have. So for some of them, they still say, I am as good as dead. Thank you.
Anna, this is so profound and deep, and you picked on something that's very interesting for me. Right at the beginning, when you spoke about punishment, whereby a girl child in a community, if she falls pregnant, then she's tarnished the image of everybody else. So everybody else in that specific community is then associated with one person's mishap, which I feel is not fair. But the other point that you actually touched on that was actually interesting for me, and that I would like to like just get your understanding on it, is the issue of religion. So there's a myth that goes around that churches should never get involved in teenage pregnancy because it's more of a political matter, right? But then you spoke about how the church also further came in as a, could we say, a tool or a guidance or assistance in still instilling fear in these young girls who are then feeling that socially they're dead. So do you think, in your own understanding, So, do you think, in your own understanding, it's correct to say that the church should not be involved in political issues pertaining to teenage pregnancy? And to what extent can the church come in, the concept of religion, how can they change the way they think to rekindle these girls and and help them to be reintegrated back into the community where they feel they're no longer wanted? Because if the church is also coming in with a hard stance, where are these girls running off to? You spoke about them taking lives to the streets, having to live on the streets. Some of them don't even have access to education. So, how are they actually supposed to make a living? So, if we are going to look at the church, what can the church do differently based on what you have just researched and known, and what you've just given us? What do you think, to what extent can the church come in and implement change?
Okay, thank you so much. In Uganda, religion plays a very significant role in policy making. Actually, one of the scholars I like to read, Sylvia Tamale, she says that in Uganda, culture intertwines with religion to influence the policy and decision making in Uganda. And why is this important in Uganda, for instance? Not only the church, but basically religion to even include Islam. In Uganda, the religious institutions hold a lot of social power. Most of the schools belong, over half of the schools, and actually even half, I'm giving a small number, but over half of all the schools that we have in Uganda belong to the religious institutions. Most of the hospitals also belong to the religious institutions. And so the government sometimes also, I think, gets constrained, even when they make a decision and they pass a policy. For instance, like the one I've talked about, re-entry guidelines of student mothers, the religious institutions can refuse this because for them, there is a moral question, really, which is in the picture. Actually, just this year, there was a lot of debates from the religious institutions who were saying, as the religious institutions, our part is to instill morals in the girls, and so those who become pregnant become a bad example to the others. And so we cannot allow these girls in our schools because we are here to also instill morals. So in Uganda, if the religious institutions therefore refuse a policy direction, it becomes challenging to implement because they hold the resource power. They will say no in our schools. It is actually the same situation we have had in terms of sexuality education campaigns in Uganda, because the government wanted to do sexuality education both in school and, of course, out of school. And in school, we have been stranded with this policy until now, which was passed in 2018, because the religious institutions, they keep going back and forth. We don't like this language. We don't want to talk about sex. We don't want to talk about contraceptives. We cannot see condoms being demonstrated in our schools. It is immoral. So the whole discussion around sexuality, sexual and reproductive health of young people becomes a very fragile thing to discuss, to talk about in Uganda, because religion has a particular moral standard which the young people have got to follow. And so you are right when you say, what can the religious institutions do? The religious institutions can certainly do a lot. And I think in Uganda, for example, if the religious institutions were able to be acceptive of sexuality, sexual reproductive health education, then it would change a lot because of the social power I have talked about. They have the schools, so they can or they cannot. So for us, I think what the direction that Uganda would possibly take, that I think about, is that we need to exploit the opportunities that we have. First of all, the religious institutions having the social capital, but also in Uganda, the religious institutions have an umbrella organization which puts them together, irrespective of their faith, of their belief. The interreligious council, it puts together the Catholics, the Protestants, the Islam, and all other religions are put together under the interreligious council of Uganda. So that is an opportunity, I think, which the government can draw on to be able to bring them on board, to seek their support, to ensure that they can be supportive. But of course, the issue of morals is a key issue, which I think needs to be ably handled. Maybe they need to be a strike over compromise, really, because on one hand is the morals of the religious institutions. Sin is a sin. Sexual intercourse is a big sin, and so for us to even talk about like contraceptives, are we saying that they should? I mean, so it is a bit. It's a bit of a controversy, but in Uganda, the religious institutions, they have a big role that they can play. If they choose, if they are accepting, then a lot can be done because they have this kind of power. Yeah.
So religion, religion, the same as this African concept of Ubuntu, teaches about love and acceptance and the humanness of each and every individual. So, Anna, how do you feel that in both cases, morality trumps acceptance or morality trumps one's humanness? Because I mean, in either case, it's human to fail, right? Even if we're looking within the Christian context or religion, we accept that we are not perfect people. We are bound to sin. If we're Christians, we believe that we are born with sin. It's a part of us. So now, yeah, how do we work around this issue of morality trumping one's humanness?
Yes. What seems to be the position that we have in Uganda is yes, there is the whole element of a second chance, and lately I think there are even programs which talk about second chance. So morality is very key for the religious institutions. And what is happening now is that even the religious leaders, what they are saying is they do not want to see a pregnant girl in school. They do not want to see a mother bring their child to school, but they can come to school later because their argument is this one girl is going to, if I may use the word, contaminate. She's going to contaminate all the other girls, and they are going to want to do what she has actually done. So the religious institutions really, in that way, they compromise in that one angle, that these children, these girls, they can go back to school, but not when it is visible that they are mothers or they are pregnant. They don't want this kind of visibility to be seen. Therefore, yes. So I think this, in a way, is contagious as well. Because religion, of course, talks about forgiveness. It talks about love and care for everyone. It is about all of us come to, I am also a Christian, and I believe that, even Jesus Christ said, let them come as they are to me. But this is not, I mean, it is still not acceptable. The whole thing of come as you are, it is not acceptable, really. So, but I think it is also good to start from the little strength that we have that is available, especially since there is that option. They can come to school later. So there is that kind of compromise that later is allowed. But also in Uganda, we can talk about, we can do sexuality education, but it must be age sensitive, culturally sensitive. It must be sensitive to religion as well. So certain basic information can be given, but you are not supposed to be very explicit about particular information. So it is a conversation that I think we must continue to have with the religious leaders, begin from the very point where they also are accepting that we cannot condemn them forever. So we can just begin from that point. Let us not condemn them forever, but for how long then are we going to condemn them? Yeah.
So what I'm just seeing and understanding from comparing stories, basically, Anna, with what happens in Zimbabwe and what's happening in Uganda, the issue of perfection is like the biggest topic that runs through this issue of perfection, morality, punishment. And I see punishment is coming in different forms here, because in our if we're going to look at back in Zimbabwe, half the time the girl is either married off to this guy, right? And the levels of shame and whatever name that they put on her sticks with her throughout the years of her life. And this is a thing that's also happening in Uganda. But what we're seeing here is the biggest problem is we want to live in a world where we think these teenagers live in a perfect world. In this day and age where technology is at the level it is at, how then can sectors like religious sectors be ignorant to the fact that they do not want sexual education to be a topic that they talk about, but this thing is happening all around. Kids are exposed to these things over the internet. It's just a matter of googling and seeing what's happening and what's not happening. So this is I feel like this is a very important topic. We all need to sit down and rethink what it is that we're really doing for these young girls, because I don't see how we are raising women of power and influence when we are killing them silently. There is no perfection in the way we live. We don't raise our kids to be perfect beings, but we are stewards instead. We steward our kids in the right way. We nurture them in the right way. So when we are punishing them and killing their potential and saying that they are not allowed to go to a school because what they did will be seen as something that is okay for everybody else. But we don't live in a perfect world. If they're not doing it at the school, they're still going to do it outside the school. So, what do you think, as a person of influence right now in this area, since you are working with a lot of teen moms, you as Anna, what is the picture you would like to paint, right, for the progression of this topic around teenage pregnancy? What would be the ideal life that you would like to see for these young ladies as they move forward?
I think you have really explained it so well. But one thing that also I think we lose in this whole discussion is the fact that pregnancy is not about this individual failure, and that is what normally is emphasized, but that is not always the case. In Uganda, for example, we know that 40 something, about 40% of the girls experience sexual abuse in their lifetime during their childhood. And so many of even the pregnancies are coerced, they are forced. But unfortunately, of course, society will only look at the pregnancy, at this girl, but it is not always about this particular girl who should take the blame. Apart from sexual abuse, which is also common in Uganda, there are other there are other intersecting social cultural dynamics which come into play. For instance, like during COVID, the numbers of teenage pregnancy went so high because the girls were not in school, because they were looking for survival. They wanted to they want to have even as basics as like sanitary pads, which they are not able to afford. So the problem with most actors, including the religious institutions, is looking at this particular pregnancy as the problem and not looking at this girl and situating her into context, into this whole environment where there are all these intersecting factors. And so for me, I would think that this is a discussion that needs to be clear, even with the religious leaders and other actors, actually, that teenage pregnancy is not an individual fault necessarily. It is just this body we are seeing as pregnant, but there are many factors which are into place. And that is why, for me, as someone who has worked with the girls for a long time, who has listened to their narratives, listened to their stories, that is why I think we can do more in the different capacities we are in, because it is completely not about them. If I have time, for instance, Shamizo, I can share with you one of the emotional stories that I had on my field work. This girl was 14 years, and during COVID, she was helping her parents to manage a shop in her community. And so they were selling petty small things in the shop. And so one day, this young man, who is like 19 or 20, was her customer. So he used to come and buy goods from her. So on this day, he came and bought like a cake, a donut. That's how we call them here. It only costed 500 shillings. 500 shillings in Uganda is so small, very small money. But this man did not pay. So he told the girl, come to my home and you collect your money. A coin of 500 shillings. So anyway, she went to collect this date because she also feared that if her mother comes, the mother is going to balance and say, but some money is missing. So she went to collect this money. And when she reached there, this young man raped her. So it was a fight. She tried to fight, but this boy was much stronger than her. And so the boy raped her. She feared to talk about the rape because she thought maybe her family would blame her for the rape, like maybe she wanted. So she decided to keep quiet. During this ordeal of rape, she actually sustained a lot of vaginal fractures. She treated herself. She had heard that you can use salt from experiences of nursing her bigger sisters who had given birth. So she treated herself and eventually she got fine. She didn't think about pregnancy at the time, but then later she actually had got pregnant. So the mother gets to know that she had got pregnant. So she later explained her story. The mother helped her to terminate the pregnancy. They took this man to prison. Oh my goodness, this girl was blamed. Community blamed her for having this young man jailed. They said she took herself there. She wanted. Now the family wants money. Now she's changing the story. It was horrible that the girl's life was even under a lot of threat. She had to leave her community and go to live in another community where she was not known. This was a 14-year-old, and these things are happening everywhere. But when pregnancy happens, eventually, all of a sudden, our eyes are on this particular girl, on this particular pregnancy, and no one is even willing to try and understand what are the circumstances moving forward. me, who has interacted with these girls, and I know their realities which they experience, including actually those who are not raped but who consent. The realities are also very different. Is that as actors in whatever positions we are positioned, we need to be intentional and listen. We need to listen to what is happening. We need to listen to the stories. We need to be able to listen, understand, and be accepting, so rather than stand on pulpits as religious leaders and say they are immoral, we cannot have them back in our schools. We need to accept, we need to appreciate that they are living in this very society to which all of us contribute to where they are today. And we therefore all have a responsibility to support them, to make them better, to provide for them, and to make sure that they get out of these particular situations that they are in. Their situation is not because of them solely. As a community, we all have a responsibility to have brought them where they are, and so we should take responsibility to lift them from where they are as well. Yeah, that is what I feel.
That is so true. I really like the direction that you have taken me. And when you were telling the story of this young 14-year-old, I could picture the whole thing happening. And I can't even imagine the trauma that she has to live with right now. And her going through that experience and not being able to tell her mother that this is what has happened. So, like you rightfully said, it's high time everyone else around the continent starts looking at the matters of teenage pregnancy differently. Let's look at each and every moving part in this situation. Every actor has something that they have done and contributed to the end result. Let's not just look at the girl and look at her and say she's pregnant, she's shamed us, she's disgraced us. It's not that. Because if we're really tapping into who we are as people, generally, as people, we are people who are loving, we're a community, we're people that needs to cover and shield each other. So then we should look at these situations with compassion. I'm really grateful for you taking us through this part of this conversation and giving us a Uganda perspective. And now I've learned a lot, but I'm going to hand it over to Shamiso now.
So, Anna, as a social scientist and as someone who's actually been involved in work on the ground where we're trying to address issues of teenage motherhood, of child marriage, and sexual and reproductive health and the education in that space, how do you think we can accelerate, if it's possible to accelerate, the positive changes that are happening in this space as far as teenage pregnancy is concerned? Is there something that we can do as individuals that can help us to move forward?
Okay, Shamizo and Yvonne, thank you. Yes, as different actors, we can do something. And I want to say that this is a responsibility that is upon everyone, starting from the family up to the state. Everyone has a role which they can play. Even actually, the young people themselves have a role which they can play. The young mothers themselves have a role which they can play. And even as we discuss this, I also want to emphasize that the young mothers as well are key and critical social actors. They are not passive in this whole situation. They have, I have talked with them, and I know that in a way they exercise their agency, though most maybe in constrained ways. And so, even as we think about how we can change the situation, we need also to be mindful of what contribution that they can make in changing their own situation. But first of all, me, I think as different actors, we need to stop moralizing, like we have been talking, we need to stop moralizing the issue of teenage pregnancy, because for me it is not really so much of a moral problem, but it is because of compounding factors which we should all accept. But it is important that the young people are able to have accurate information, regarding their sexuality and sexual and reproductive health services. It is important that they know where they can access what particular service. The more we keep silent about sharing with them this kind of knowledge, then we are not doing them a good. So, and this begins from right even in our homes to the larger communities. All of us are able to share information with young people. So for me, that is pertinent. The issue of empowering the young people with adequate and accurate information is going to save them quite a lot. But also the issue of accepting that young people are sexual beings, it is very important. And I know that discussing in spirituality, discussing issues of accepting young people as sexual being, it is like a contradiction. But yes, young people are sexual beings, and this is something that we need to be accepting, that they are sexual beings. Not all of them are going to abstain. Actually, even if we talk about abstinence, as in the religious circles, we know not all of them are going to abstain. Actually, I have had discussions with parents, and I have asked them what they mean by abstinence and if they think that abstinence is possible, and it's possible for everyone. And I normally ask them, if for them they abstained, you see, for you today, you don't want to talk about sexual and reproductive health issues openly, but for you, were you able to abstain, such that we can then know that abstaining is as simple as that, and everybody can abstain. So all of us need to be real, even as we have this discussion. So the parents need to share this information. They need to be real as they talk with their children. Of course, we need a favorable policy environment. In Uganda, we have some policies, but they are restrictive policies. We need to move to having more transformative policies which enable, the young people to be able to exercise their sexual and reproductive rights more, more easily. Like in Uganda, for instance, contraceptives is a fragile topic. It is only acceptable for sexually active women. They usually look at the sexually active women who are in marriage. So it is not sure, we are not sure whether any girl can go and access these services, contraceptives, or whether they cannot. So it is a fragile topic. So we also need to have a legal environment which is more supportive and which is more transformative, really. But in a whole, at every level, each one of us has got a responsibility which we can play, starting from the young people themselves up to the nation.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's been a great pleasure having you here on our show, and you've given us so much insights. Especially for us, we only had the Zimbabwean picture, and for me to now have the picture of what it looks like in Uganda, I now get a better and broader defined picture of what it is that we as African people can do. So I just wanted to ask that, Anna, if there's anyone who wants to get in touch with you and maybe to work with you on what you're currently researching on, or maybe other partners who would like to partner with you with what your current initiative that you're running, if you do have any initiatives, are you open to partnerships with people from across Africa? And if so, would you like to share a platform that you would like them to engage with you on?
I am so passionate. I'm so passionate about issues of young people, and especially issues of young mothers. And it is something I would be very excited to continue doing, and even collaborating with like-minded thinkers. I'll welcome working with really anyone from across the globe, actually, who would want to join these debates and these conversations and research and even implementation as well. I think we need to have like a whole network that we can continue to carry forward this kind of conversation. Yes, I can be reached on my email. Right now, I have been very fortunate to be working with UNFPA as an intern on their national high-level campaign against teenage pregnancy. It is very, very interesting because it is spearheaded by high-level women leaders in Uganda, who is the First Lady of Uganda. The Prime Minister of Uganda is a woman. Then the Vice President also is a woman, and these are the ones who are spearheading this campaign. And so, for me, this is an opportunity that we can even continue to have these kinds of discussion. This is the first one that I'm working with UNFPA, and there are many other interventions that I think we can do with so many other actors.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Anna. So you've heard it all, our listeners. For those who would like to get in touch with Anna and work with her on different initiatives pertaining to teenage pregnancy, you can get hold or in touch with us on our Facebook page, Africa to the World. We will share the email address with Anna at her discretion. So, in the aspect of Ubuntu togetherness and giving everybody a sense of belonging and a place on this continent and on this earth and the world, we as Africa to the World, we shall continue this conversation in the future. If you want to get in touch with us and have a conversation around this or any other conversations that we are going to be having, any stories that we're going to be telling here on our platform, you know where to get hold of us. Africa to the World, our Facebook page. So thank you so much, Anna, for taking time to join us. And thank you, Dr. Shamiso, for joining us again today, my hostess with the mostest. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. So I am Yvonne.
And I'm Shami.
This is Africa to the World, and we'll catch you on the next round.